Nation. Trace Trilko here, and welcome to the Sons of UCF Live. The Gus bus fills up with assistant coaches. Boom! Cue the Shakespeare puns. Mark Antony is a knight, and the poll results are in. Which games you think are the easiest and most difficult on UCF's 2021 football schedule? We welcome in a couple of five-star recruits, Adam and Mike. Mike, look at this, Adam. It's more than that. Wait, hold on. Got to be more like, there we go. How's that? Is that better? I don't think I pull it off as well.
It looks good, but you got to show off the logo. That's the hat you can't put backwards. There's nobody behind you, right? If there were people behind you, you'd be good. Then they can see the logo. Right now for the show, looks good.
We'll do it for a few moments.
It's a hard-earned hat, Trace. You have done your due diligence. You have earned the hat. You deserve the hat, and you wear it well, my friend. Congratulations on being one of only, 6 people now, Mike? You have a hat? 7? I don't even really know.
Well, you have a couple.
I do.
He's got one. I gave out, I think Schneider got one that night. And a couple other people got one the night of the bowl game. We sent out a couple. I only have 2 left, so there's 10 out there somewhere.
And 27 promised. Based on previous Sons of UCF episodes.
That rumor has it there may be more coming. Who knows? Yeah. Stay tuned for that.
That is a good rumor. I picked up my mail today. I have not had an opportunity to start leafing through it. By the way, at 88 pages, is it fair to call it a book? A little more like a pamphlet, but he's written more than I have. I do a little research. Maybe we'll talk more about that on next week's show. Since your show, episode 121 of the Sons of UCF, a couple more assistant coaches hired, including former Arkansas assistant Kenny Ingram to coach D-line, and former Western Kentucky assistant Kenny Martin, a defensive assistant. The one that strikes me most interesting is Daryl Wyatt. Remember him? Returning to coach wide receivers. What did you make of that return engagement?
I want to give credit to JP Gilbert on Twitter, who said the best 30 for 30 may be the 4 weeks of Daryl Wyatt's disappearance, where he was and what he did. It was a surprise, right? I think, we never got a clear story as to why he left the program. I think there are some people who think maybe he was asked to leave. Perhaps he left on his own accord. So surprised to see him come back. But if you think about it logically, it makes some sense. Obviously he knows the program, familiar with the players. It's late in the game, so what receiving coaches were available. The salary aspect also plays a role in it. I will say the good news is it seemed like the receivers on the Twitter sphere were happy to have him back. So you got to at least put one in the +1 column, as Heupel would say, for that element of it.
Are we still referencing Josh Heupel? Is that what we're doing?
It comes out. So, old habits die hard, Trace.
Hey, we've been asking, are we going to have any former UCF players or coaches on this staff? He's the only guy that is now back that has experience at UCF. At least he's worked with some of these receivers that are on the roster, so there's some continuity there. The receiving core has been solid for the last few years. I mean, talking about guys like Marlon Williams, Trey Nixon, Gabe Davis, guys that are going to the NFL. So he's obviously worked with some good players. And is this a kind of a little knock on Heupel? It's not. It's known that him and Heupel probably didn't get along that great. So a little middle finger to Heupel on the way out. What do you think?
A fired guy, not really fired. We hired guys that didn't really stick. So it's been an interesting month.
Caught in the wash. I feel bad for Matt Merritt, who was our running back coach for all of 6 days. And then Heupel left, and he's the only one who didn't get taken to Tennessee. So Matt Merritt, wherever you are, God love you for your time at UCF. You'll forever be a UCF legend. Maybe we can get him on the show, Mike, and we can talk and get the in-depth day-by-day experience of Matt Merritt's tenure as a UCF Knight.
Hey, we've had guys on the show that, like Joey Popolo a couple of weeks ago, only had, 2 carries in his career? Matt Merritt for 4 days. I don't know how many questions we can come up with to talk to that guy for more than 5 minutes.
There's always rapid fires, Mike. There's always rapid fires.
Well, speaking of that, why don't you do a little homework during this show? There's a press availability with new UCF head football coach Gus Malzahn, Friday, 9 o'clock in the morning. So over the next 55 minutes or so, why don't you think of some questions that if time permits and I'm able to hop on the Zoom on Friday morning that I might ask. I will not ask him if he thinks a hot dog is a sandwich or other notable rapid fire questions that come at the end of interviews on the Sons of UCF. But be thinking one each and I'll jot them down.
Can you ask him his favorite Heupelism?
Oh, good. Would you like me to return for a second press availability? Because it may be the only one.
Depends what he says. If he says something really good, Trace, one and done, I'm fine with it. But well, yeah, listen, if audience, if you guys have questions, help Mike and I out. Clearly, we may need some help there. Let us know what your questions for Gus might be in the chat, and we'll pull some out. And Trace will feed you some here towards the end of the show.
Yeah, I would appreciate it. I need to do a little homework, maybe get a chapter in of the 88-page Gus Malzahn book. Of course, the Josh Heupel book was a quick read, just 4 pages, 4 plays. All right, how about a Shakespearean pun? Friends, knights, countrymen, lend me your ears. Auburn running back Mark Anthony Richards transfers to UCF, a 4-star. Gus Malzahn reeling him in already.
And this is a good one for us, right? Because the running back room obviously lost a ton of talent with both Greg McCrae, who shamelessly was on the Sons of UCF show that's available now for everybody out there, and Otis Anderson also leaving the backfield. So we had some young guys that I think we were excited about. So he brings some much needed depth to the running back position to team with Bentavious Thompson, Demarius Good, Johnny Richardson, Trillian Cole still back there. So another able-bodied running back is certainly helpful. Don't yet know, but we have an insider coming up soon, Trace. Curious to see how Malzahn uses his running backs. We saw Heupel with a really heavy rotation. Can we expect the same thing out of Malzahn? And then that may tell us how much we expect to see both Richards and Thompson and those other guys. But you can't have too many guys who can run the football, Trace.
Are we speeding up the way we talk now because this guy Lee Wigglesworth that says we talk too slow because he listens to our show on 1.5 speed all the time? I'm not going to do that for the whole episode, but a 4-star. Hey, a 4-star. This is not our first ever 4-star, but it's a good sign that his first commit is a 4-star. Obviously, a kid that he already had a relationship with at Auburn. So he's off to a great start. Let's see how many he can pull in. What is our record? I told you guys I was going to come at you with questions. Trace, what's our record for 4-stars signed in one class? I don't think it's more than 3. It can't be.
Oh, so you don't know the answer either?
People out there watching the show will know the answer. Somebody out there will have. I bet you Cossack Advisor knows.
I'm beginning to see why this may not be the highest rated show in the UCF podcast space.
Unofficial, Trace. I haven't seen the rankings.
This is the highest rated live UCF weekly show, I believe.
Between 8 and 9
on Thursday night.
Thursday nights. It has been asked, and it'll be a question to ask our guest, just how many 4-stars and high caliber players Coach Malzahn can recruit. I mean, he has certainly thrown out dozens of offers, and in a short period of time. How many he is able to bring in, though, time's going to tell on that.
Yeah, I said this on the show this week, Trace. This reminds me of that Seinfeld episode. Anybody can take the reservation, right? Anybody can give the offers. Obviously, getting these kids across the line and on campus is a whole different story. But I think that for us, the secret sauce lies in this, right? If you think about the kids that we're going after, the 4 or 5 stars, I think we have to strategically figure out which ones we really want, and we have to go hard and win those battles. But for my money, I think the battles we need to win are the 3 and 4-star guys who are going to schools like LSU, Maryland, Penn State, South Carolina, Virginia Tech, Baylor, Memphis, Texas A&M. Louisville had 4 kids in 2018 from Florida that went to Louisville over UCF. We need to win those battles consistently. If we win 3 of every 4 of those and 1 of every 4 of one of the 4-star, 5-star guys we want, to me, that's a good recipe for a couple of years of building up the program, continuing the success. And then we start to get into the 4 and 5-star guys that we can then go after religiously and maybe get the opportunity to go after. But I think we got to win some of these local 3, high 3, low 4-star guys that are going to Illinois and Maryland and West Virginia. Keep those kids in Florida.
Malzahn's been here for a week, 9 days, and he's already got 1 4-star. Hey, we got a 4-star before he even got here. The kid from Hawaii the week before that. So that's 2 4-stars already. I don't see why he can't do it. Until he goes a month without getting another one, I'm not going to question the guy.
Mike, is that a record for 4-star? Oh, that's right. You didn't have the answer to that question.
Hey, we may be close to the record if we got 2 already.
And Mark Anthony, Wellington High School, West Palm Beach, Florida kid. So 1 Florida kid for Gus Malzahn, 5 in the previous hypo class, so we're moving in the right direction with the Florida kids. Let's talk a little bit more now with an Auburn insider. Get to know Coach Malzahn and his recruiting style. We welcome into the Sons of UCF Live Christian Clemente, Auburn beat writer for auburnsports.com, assistant sports editor for the Auburn's Plainsman, and you can find him at @CClemente_. Thanks so much for joining us on the Sons of UCF Live. Gus Malzahn, in just 9 days, has put together his coaching staff at UCF. Guys, with some Auburn ties.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. First off, I think defensive coordinator Travis Williams is a home run hire for UCF. He was a outstanding linebacker coach at Auburn. He did a great job recruiting. He did such a good job connecting with the players personally. And so I think Gus bringing him in as a DC and giving him his first kind of big opportunity to take a coordinator role, I think that's a great hire for Gus at UCF.
Christian, as you've watched Gus from afar these past few weeks at UCF, one of the things that some have said in the national media is that they feel like this is a more energized Gus Malzahn. You obviously spent a lot of time around him when he was at Auburn. Are you sensing that same thing? There's a more energy and more excitement out of Gus than maybe you'd seen in previous seasons?
Absolutely. I mean, he looked like he was coming off an Iron Bowl win at that introductory press conference. He was excited. He was ready to roll, and I've never seen him at a press conference. So I think that's a good sign for UCF to see him really fired up. You know, some people, Auburn fans, were saying, is Gus just going there and he's going to ride off into retirement in Florida? That's not going to be the case. Gus is going to be fired up at UCF, and he's going to do his best to take that program to the very top.
We've had different coaches here the last few years with different philosophies. So George O'Leary, he would open up the practices to the media. He had no problem doing a lot of interviews. The last couple of coaches, we had maybe 15 minutes to get in there for practice. What do you think that access Malzahn's going to offer up to the media? How was he over in Auburn?
He's pretty closed off in the media. He'll talk to the media for as long as you want in a press conference. His longest press conferences were usually 20 minutes. He's short and to the point, but in terms of actually going to practice, it's going to be pretty closed off for you guys.
Let's talk a little bit more about recruiting. We had an Auburn insider on last week's show, and he said maybe a B+ grade for him as a recruiter. At his opening press conference, he talked about a 6-hour drive from Orlando. He can reel in quite a few players. How would you evaluate his recruiting during his time in Auburn?
I think B+ is fair. I would probably go higher than that. I'd give him an A-. I mean, he always had a top 20 class, and before he was leaving, his class was a little bit worse, but it still would have finished top 20 if he would have stayed there. So I think he would have brought in a good class, and I just think he's a good recruiter. He has some faults, but I think he started to realize that towards the end, and I think he'll be able to do that at UCF. Sometimes he wouldn't go out to the players' houses as much as he probably should have and had face-to-face conversations with them, but overall, he did a good job recruiting at Auburn. I'd give it an A-.
Well, one of those guys he recruited at Auburn and now is at UCF, Mark Anthony Richards, announced his intent to join UCF this upcoming season. I know he didn't play a ton for Auburn, but what did you see in the time that he got on the field when he was up there in Alabama?
Yeah, he is a fantastic player. He dealt with some injuries at Auburn his freshman year. He was obviously hurt and missed the whole season. And then going into his sophomore season this past year, he dealt with some COVID issues in the fall, and then he dealt with another injury. So he didn't really see the field until the end of the year. But when he did see the field, he was good, and we knew that as a recruit. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can run. He's got good vision. I think he is a fantastic running back. I know the new Auburn coaching staff tried their hardest to get him to pull out of the transfer portal and come back to Auburn, but they couldn't do so. So Gus bringing him to UCF, I think, is a great gift.
There's some history now with UCF and Auburn. Obviously, going back to the Peach Bowl. And before that, I don't know how far back you go, but early in the 90s, we played a few times too. What's the Auburn fans' view of UCF overall now?
Yeah, now it's a little bit different. For a little bit, it wasn't a rivalry, but it was a little bit of one. And now Auburn fans are kind of like, well, I guess I kind of have to root for them, because that's the thing about Auburn fans. They love Gus. They were ready to see, for the most part, they were ready to see him go, and they were ready for a change, but they still love Gus, and it's hard not to. So they're going to be rooting for him at UCF, and I think silently they'll be rooting for UCF and hoping that the Knights do as good as they can.
Talk a little bit more about that reaction. You just said something there about maybe it was time to change the chapter. Do you think he had just run out of being effective at the level Auburn fans or boosters expected? I mean, he has had success, certainly against Alabama, which is difficult for any coach, especially those in the SEC. did he just run out of goodwill with the fan base?
Yeah, I think things have just gotten a little stale, a little stagnant, and the way he recruited at Auburn, it'll work at UCF, bringing in those top 20 classes, but recruiting at Auburn, every 3 or 4 years, once he had players coming back, they could recruit or they could compete for a national championship or an SEC championship or whatever, but they could not consistently compete every year with the talent that he brought in at Auburn, playing the likes of Alabama and Georgia and such. So I think the fans and the boosters and the people behind the scenes were just kind of ready for a change. And I think it'll be good for Gus too. I think he was probably – I don't think he wanted to leave, but a change will be good for him.
This week we learned about boom, which apparently is one of Gus Malzahn's favorite phrases. What can you tell us about Gus and his love of the word boom?
Yeah, boom. You're going to see that every time you get a commit. And then in some of the post-game videos in the locker rooms, you're going to see him hyped up, and he's going to be hammering down with the booms. Try and go find some on Auburn Twitter. They're worth the watch. It's fun to see.
I know he's not one-dimensional. You've been to a bunch of his press conferences. What are some of his other phrases that he uses all the time? Our last coach had a bunch of them. Pretty much every press conference was the same. Does he kind of fall into that routine?
He does. So he's going to start off every single press conference with, okay, he's going to say, okay, we've got a good opponent coming in. And then he's going to say no doubt 5+ times each press conference. There's no doubt we've got a good Cincinnati team coming in this week. He will say that nonstop.
Is there something not to ask, as there's a press availability at 9 a.m. Friday morning, and I hope to be on that? Is there something I should not mention?
I don't think so. Gus is very open. He's gotten some really tough and probably unfair questions at Auburn. I witnessed one, and he didn't look too happy about it, but he sat there and answered it. And then Gus would always, obviously now it's a little tougher because of COVID, but afterwards he would sit and talk with the media just off to the side. And, he gave him a piece of his mind then and said, hey, man, that question was a little unfair, but they'll answer the questions, and he's good about it.
I want to speak a little bit more about his coaching style, and in particular, he made a point of emphasis at his opening press conference at UCF in saying he was going to call the plays. Talk a little bit about that roller coaster, calling the plays, not calling the plays, and how it evolved over time at Auburn.
Yeah, it was all over the place. Every single season, the quarterback at Auburn now, Bo Nix, he'll be going into his 3rd offensive coordinator now. And so Gus consistently had to bring in different offensive coordinators. Sometimes he would trust them to call the plays, and then halfway through the season, he would yank it back because he didn't like what they were calling, or he didn't think they were doing a good enough job. He was all over the place, but I'm glad that he's saying, I'm going to call the plays, and he said, I'm going to call the plays for the rest of his career. Will he stick with that? I don't know, because he said that before the 2019 season when he did call the plays. Then he brought in Chad Morris for 2020 and said, I'm going to give it over to Chad again. But I think him calling plays is the best way for Gus Malzahn to be on the sideline.
How do you think he's going to fare recruiting Alabama now? We saw a flurry of offers come out from Gus, and the majority of them came out of the state of Alabama, which makes sense. He knows that territory really well. But he's got T. Will. He's also got Brian Blackman, who comes from Troy, who was a high school coach in Alabama. How do you think UCF and Malzahn specifically will do recruiting Alabama?
I think they'll be able to do a pretty good job. I think he'll be able to dip into Alabama, maybe get a 4-star here and there, and get some of the 3 stars that Alabama and maybe Auburn aren't quite as interested in. And I think he'll be able to swoop in and get them because he's got such good relationships with pretty much all the high school coaches around here. So I think for Alabama, he'll be able to do a pretty good job of recruiting it.
How excited would you guys be with a rematch? Say we met up again in a bowl game or maybe a future scheduled game. Now that Gus is on our sideline, does that excite you a little bit more? Do you guys still want a piece of us, or are you a little scared still?
I would love to see that game. The storylines would be great. I love to see Gus again and cover Gus again. It was a little bittersweet to sit in his introductory press conference and realize this is probably the last time I'm going to sit in one of his press conferences. But I would love to see that game happen, man. That would be so much fun.
A lot is spoken about his ability to develop quarterbacks, and Cam Newton was a while ago. He comes in now with Dylan Gabriel, so we want to see what that relationship is like for UCF. Expand a little bit more on his ability to develop quarterbacks during his tenure at Auburn.
Yeah, his quarterback development was not the greatest, but I think it went hand in hand with what he struggled with in recruiting, which was the offensive line. So he didn't really set up his quarterbacks for success in that regard. Like Bo Nix, Auburn's current quarterback, he's a great quarterback. He was a great high school quarterback. He makes some wild plays, but he doesn't have an offensive line. He can't do anything. I don't know. That's the biggest problem for me. I don't think Gus was a terrible quarterback developer like some people say he is. I just don't think he set them up for success well enough. So that'll be something to look out for at UCF.
I saw Trace has purchased Gus's book, or maybe a pamphlet. We're not quite sure what to call it yet, which he will hold up for you there. So how would you describe Gus's offense, having watched it for so long? Is it up-tempo? Is it run balanced? Is it pass balanced? How would you describe what you saw in Gus's time at Auburn?
Well, at the beginning of Auburn, his time at Auburn, it was very up-tempo. He got away from that a little bit and tried to get back to it recently. But the one thing he's going to love to do is he's going to love to run the ball. And you're going to hear that going back to that other question in the press conference. Yeah, there's no doubt we love to run the ball. He's going to say that, and he's going to talk about establishing the run, and that's going to be his go-to. He's going to run up the middle a lot, which Auburn fans would get pretty upset with from time to time, but he's definitely going to lean on the run game.
You see the banner back here, right? Obviously, you know where that comes from. What's the Auburn fans' view on us claiming that? Obviously, it was against you guys, but you guys had a similar season. 2004, you went undefeated, didn't get invited to the championship game, still claimed the national title. How do you guys view our claim that year?
Most of the Auburn fans, they think it's a little silly. I personally don't have any issues with it. I mean, Auburn had a great season that year. They beat some good teams, and then you guys beat Auburn. So it's fair enough to me.
During the 2020 season, UCF put up 49 points against Memphis and lost the game 50-49. So I noted that Coach Malzahn mentioned during his opening presser that there was going to be a renewed emphasis on defense. When his defense is working as it should, what are we going to see?
I mean, it'll be interesting to see how much or how T. Will is able to do with that, and how much of it was Kevin Steele, because Auburn had one of the best defenses in the country. Not so much this year, but you look back at recent years where you had Derek Brown and Marlon Davidson, they had some shutdown defenses. So I think Gus is really going to put an emphasis on that. And even though he's an offensive guy, he always has put an emphasis on defense and trying to make sure that his defense is as good as possible. So I think it's pretty realistic to think that UCF could have a solid defense this next year.
Yeah, let's talk about T. Will for a second. Is this the first time he's been the defensive play caller?
Yeah, he was the inside linebacker coach at Auburn, and he was there for, I want to say 6 years, but he was just a fantastic coach, man. The players loved him.
All right, I was a little rough the last couple of questions. So something we can agree on. The Gator fans are the biggest trash in the SEC. Is that true? Or where would you rank Gator fans among trash?
You know, probably Alabama, Georgia. Those two kind of interchange depending on who you're talking to. But Florida is definitely up there near the top. I don't know if they can top Georgia and Alabama, but Florida's near the top.
Is that only because you don't play Florida every year? I think if you did, you might have a different view.
Yeah, in 2019, Auburn played Florida, and Bo Nix had a tough game, and Bo Nix is still not hearing the end of it. So
let's wrap up with this, Christian. How long do you think Gus Malzahn is in Orlando? Does he end his career? He's just 55. Is this a final destination type of job, or do you see him jumping back into the SEC or other conference after a successful, perhaps short tenure at UCF?
You know, I realistically could see Gus at UCF for the rest of his career. Seeing him in that press conference, seeing him just how fired up he was to be there, I think he's really excited to be there. I think he's going to build something really special at UCF. And I think he's in there for the long haul. I don't know what job it would possibly take to bring him out of UCF. He's from Arkansas, and he had a chance to leave Auburn for Arkansas and didn't even do that. So I don't know realistically where else he would go. I could see him at UCF for the rest of his career.
All right, we'll hold you to that and invite you back in 2 years if it doesn't last longer than that. Christian Clemente, beat writer for auburnsports.com. We appreciate you joining us for a few moments on the Sons of UCF Live, and have a good season for the Tigers this year.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. Hey, hopefully that rematch does get scheduled. I'd love to see it.
All right.
All right, here we go. Awesome.
Thank you, man. No relation
Mike,
to
see
Roberto.
what you started?
Yeah, Mike, you okay? Did he do something wrong? I mean,
I wanted to get his opinions. Some Auburn fans don't look too highly on us. Even back in '98, we know the game. We should have beat them back then. They should fear us a little bit. I mean, it's not like they've ever really dominated us.
By the way, Lonely Bumblebee, who I think is Mario, almost dropped me with his comments on the screen here. So kudos to you, Mario. You've won the If I had a hat to give out, I'd give you a hat, Mario.
There's one here, but you're not getting it.
No, sorry.
I've told a couple of people that because of the nature of the show, I'm not always looking down at the screen, so sometimes I miss the questions, and I'm really reliant upon Adam to pop those up. It was at that very moment that I looked down and saw that and had to bite a hole in my tongue so that I would not lose it. Our new athletic director, and it's still getting used to all of the newness here, it was on Open Mic with Mike Bianchi on his radio program earlier in the week, talking about scheduling. And we know that for a while, UCF 23, 24, and beyond, it gets a little lighter. But he expressed a little concern about the 2022 non-conference schedule, which right now has a game at FIU. So we'll be visiting you, Mike, down in South Florida, real South Florida. Louisville at home, Georgia Tech at home, and then UCF just needs one game, which you imagine might be something like a Bethune-Cookman or Florida A&M or something like that. I wonder what he was meaning by he's a little concerned about 2022.
Again, I don't want to say he was misquoted in his own interview, but I almost felt like he meant to say after 2022, because that's really when the schedule gets a little bit trickier for UCF, right? I think 2022 is actually pretty solid, right? Would I love to swap out some better teams? Is Georgia Tech going to be good? Is Louisville going to be good? Who knows, right? But you never know that stuff in advance. So part of me wondered if he meant to say beyond 2022. I don't want to pull a Charles Barkley and say he was misquoted in his own autobiography, but perhaps he had the wrong phrasing there. But I will say this: I do think I like that he's open to possibilities. Right or wrong, Danny painted himself in a corner with the no 2-for-1 stuff, and that was always just going to be his stance. And to come off of that would have been really tough to do. I like that Mohadra's come in and has taken more of an open approach. Doesn't sound like he's absolutely going to always do 2-for-1s. Doesn't sound like he's going to say no to those. I think a case-by-case basis is probably the right thing to do, particularly as we want to continue to fight for more and more recognition from a national perspective. So I mean, I'm pleased with what hopefully his philosophy is, and I do agree. I'd love to see what the schedule will look like beyond 2022, because I do think there's some opportunities for us to grab some big games out there.
There's some thinking that maybe after the beating we put on Georgia Tech this past year, they may buy out of that game. Maybe that's what he's referring to. Or hey, even Louisville. We go to Louisville this year. We beat them up. They may not want to come to Orlando. So maybe he's a little scared of somebody getting out of one of those games, or the fact that both of those games are at home. And he's talked about having to play a tough road game, a tough top 10 team on the road in order to get into the playoff. Maybe he wants to get one of those scheduled as that fourth game, and he doesn't see where he can get that. So different philosophies on what he might have meant when he said that. But after 2022, you're right. There's not a lot on the schedule. I think we play Louisville again, if I'm right. But other than that, I don't know who else we have as a P5 opponent.
As a longtime listener of the Sons of UCF, I know you guys are not ones to speculate. But do you think Danny White would have ever acknowledged that perhaps this strategy hadn't worked and he might have changed his direction had he remained at UCF? Or do you think he was dug in? I mean, I supported his stance, but you have to say it probably wasn't successful.
Yeah, I can't imagine a scenario that he would reverse that course, right? I think it would have to be something really out of the ordinary for Danny. I think he dug himself in too many times. I think he's probably gonna have to stay in that lane, and he would have had to have either come up with a really good excuse why he got out of that lane, or it had to be a fantastic offer. But I think that's where he was going to be at, and I agree, Trace. I understand the thinking of it, right? The old saying in life is you dress for the job you want, right? Not the job you have. And I think that's what Danny was trying to do, dress us for the job that he thinks we should be, which is a Power 5 program. And that's what Power 5 programs do. But I do think he left that door a little bit too closed. And I like that Timo is leaving it a bit ajar so that if he needs to push it open and walk through, we have that possibility. But I feel like Danny was pretty dug in on that. Because that's what he planted his flag on. That was on every Feinbaum show, every ESPN show. That was in everybody's columns that week. And so I think to reverse course on that would have put a little bit of egg on the face there.
I think he said a few times during that time that we were a top 10 team. We were a top 10 program over those couple years, and we should schedule like that. We should get the respect the top 10 teams get and get the equal home and homes. Obviously, it didn't happen. Now that he's at Tennessee, let's see if he's a man of his word. Let's see now. Terry Mohajir said he was going to call him and see what he could work out with them. They're friends. They may be able to get a game together. maybe a neutral site game. There was rumors that UCF and Tennessee had a neutral site game lined up a couple years ago, and it failed at the last second. Now we have a little in there with Tennessee. We have Danny White. I don't think he'll schedule him. I really don't think he'll schedule him while Heupel is the coach. So maybe something down the road. Can he schedule one? These games are scheduled 10, 20 years in advance nowadays. Schedule us one for 2040 when he's not even there anymore.
I saw Lee ask if a 2-for-1 with Tennessee might happen. If you look at Tennessee's schedules, they have the tough SEC home and away slate, and they tend to schedule very easy games, winnable games for them because they try to get bowl eligible. So they try to pick up 3-4 non-conference wins and hope they can get 2-3 SEC wins. So I don't see that happening, at least not in the short term.
Yeah, I don't think Danny and Josh want any part of coming right back to UCF right away. Maybe a 2027 game. I don't know if Heupel will be there at that point, but I think that's more of the speed. But I think Cossack Advisor on the screen here has a great point too, that other teams potentially stayed away from UCF because they didn't want to be the team that agreed to the 1-for-1. So did other schools not want to be that one school that sort of said, yeah, we'll do it and be ostracized in his words from that element of it too. But I don't think Danny's going to come down to UCF right now. He often said, I know he told Mike the one time they met and Sons of UCF episode 36, which doesn't exist anymore, but trust me, it happened. I think he said he hates playing his family, his brother, his dad. So I know he still has a lot of connections to UCF. I imagine he'll play that same card and say, he doesn't want to, play UCF so soon after just leaving because he cares about so many people down here.
Lies, all lies. But of course, it is convenient. It would be convenient for him to say that. I could see him saying exactly what you just said.
We spent a little bit of time as the schedule was released earlier in the day, last Thursday. I asked on Twitter at @SignPez, toughest game for the Knights, almost 81% at Cincinnati. Second was the home opener against Boise State. Then Louisville just 5% and about 1% for Memphis. Do you agree with that? If you voted or if you saw those results, would you agree at Cincinnati, the American still goes through Cincinnati until UCF wrestles it back?
Hate to say it, I think so. I mean, they're returning a lot of guys, including Desmond Ritter at quarterback. I mean, they had a really good team last year. They did lose their defensive coordinator, Marcus Freeman, to Notre Dame. So does that impact their defense? But I mean, if you want to take the crown, you got to go take it from the person who has it. And so at this point, that's Cincinnati. And until we go up there and prove that we can beat that team right now, I think they're probably the toughest game, and that would be on the schedule, at least in the way it's structured now with what we know. That's the game that we got to circle and say we got to win that one.
Yeah, the fact that it's a road game makes it a lot tougher. The Boise State game, obviously at home. UCF now is saying they're anticipating hopefully having 100% capacity. If that's the case, I'm not scared of any home games. At Louisville's a tough one. That's a Friday night. They have a new quarterback there now, McCaffrey, coming over from Nebraska. That's not going to be a cakewalk. That could be a tough one. But I think on paper right now, you have to say Cincinnati's the toughest. If they beat Notre Dame early in the year, they can come into that game undefeated. That could be a college game day game, depending on how we're doing early in the season too.
Yeah, I'd vote Cincinnati, but with the changeover to a new coach and coaching staff and a new offensive style, defensive changes as well, it could make the opener against Boise State a little bit tricky. So something to consider.
I mean, Boise is going through the same thing, though. They've got a new coach and new staff. So, I mean, they'll be trying out their new program for the first time as well, too. So it'll be kind of new on new. But I think Mike's right. You give the edge, hopefully, to the home field. You give the edge to the fact that Boise is coming all the way from Idaho, depending on what travel looks like at that point. So I think it'll be a tough one. It'll be an interesting game for sure. But I would lean Cincinnati as our toughest one.
And we're playing Boise 3 nights in a row, so you got to figure we take at least 2 of those for you.
Then the question I asked at another time was easiest team on the schedule. No respect for our opponent in the civil conflict. Nearly 40% of respondents said UConn. 30% said Bethune-Cookman. So Moore thought UConn was the easiest. Cows came in at about 28%, so just no respect for them. But no respect at all for UConn taking the entire year off. So it'll be interesting to see what they're able to do. They had, 27 guys in the transfer portal at some point? They had a lot of people in there. Let's continue to talk about the assistant coaches and some of the changes at UCF by bringing in a good guy, a UCF alum, Eric Henry. You can find him on Twitter at Eric C. Henry _ co-managing editor and Underdog Dynasty, FIU beat writer. Eric, welcome in. Oh, look, you got the backwards hat going. You pulled that off very well. Welcome into the Sons of UCF Live.
Man, I appreciate that intro, Trace. The fact that you led with me being a good guy. You know, I'm sure there are some members of UCF Twitter Mafia who would like to say otherwise, who are biased towards us. You know, I'm wearing sleeves just for that person, as a matter of fact. But appreciate the intro, man. I appreciate the chance to join on with you guys.
There was a missed opportunity here in the coordinating of sleeveless shirts with you and Mike. There seemed like there could have been an opportunity here.
I got a lot of slack for wearing a tank top at the baseball game the other day. I mean, the people that are saying that they're just haters. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. If you got it,
it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Listen, I spent 3 years in Chicago after I graduated from UCF. I went to grad school in Chicago, and I miss the days of having to spend 10, 15 minutes just to put on layers to go up, up the road a block. So anytime I can wear a tank top, we're doing it, plain and simple.
Well, let's get serious for a few moments at least. Tell us a little bit about Tim Harris Jr., new UCF co-offensive coordinator who comes from FIU.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the fact that UCF was able to snag Tim, to be honest, is a real coup for that program. Background on Tim Harris Jr. He spent his entire coaching career in terms of the collegiate level at FIU, 6 seasons as the running backs coach, was recently promoted to offensive coordinator in January. And then when I had a chance to talk to him, Tim was super fired up about the chance to get that promotion. One who started out coaching under his father at Booker T. Washington High School in Miami and coached 1 year as a head coach. And he was like, hey, I didn't expect it to happen this quickly, but the plan is coming to fruition. He's a 35-year-old coach, and the fact that he has a chance to be a coordinator on the FBS level was exciting. And then, I spoke to him as recently as the Wednesday prior to his, it was that Sunday evening that Gus Malzahn announced he would be at UCF. I knew I was going to do it, Trace. I that's my one slip up. The Sunday that he announced he'd be at UCF. And
just don't say UFC.
Tim was really fired up. Exactly. No, Tim was really fired up about the chance to, once again, be an offensive coordinator to implement his system. So what UCF is getting, because you have someone who hasn't been a coordinator on the FBS level, this would have been his first chance, is a really strong recruiter and an excellent running backs coach. Trace, I know you're a giant hip hop fan, so I'll quote J. Cole here. When Tim Harris was selling running backs on FI, he essentially was going into a house and saying, it's $1 and a dream. If you look at a running backs coach, a running back house at UCF, or with coaching with UCF, I should say, you can say, hey, we have all this history, and you're not selling someone on what the program can be as opposed to what it is. So really strong hire with Tim Harris Jr. And once again, I think for UCF fans, the fact that he's not Germany and try to recruit a running back, okay? He's going to walk into households in Dade County. He's going to walk into Miami Central. He's going to walk into Booker T. Washington. He's going to walk into Miami Northwestern and bring 3- and 4-star type running backs to UCF. So that's a great hire, in my opinion, Gus Malzahn.
Eric, as far as we know it, there's no direct tie between Gus and Tim. I think some of the other guys on the staff, they've worked together, they've known each other. I haven't seen at least a direct tie between Gus and Tim. So what does that tell you about the fact that Gus, kind of went off his radar and brought a guy like Tim Harrison? What does that say about the kind of staff you think Gus wants to build at UCF?
Well, no, you're correct. There wasn't any link. And when you look at the rest of the staff, there are guys like Herb Hand and Travis Williams, David Gibbs. Obviously, he's looking to bring in guys who he has familiarity with. And this is what I would say for UCF fans. When you brought in Scott Frost, when you brought in Josh Heupel, it was a first-time head coach, right? So you're kind of, going through your coaching circles, guys you may have coached with, and you're asking for recommendations on who may be good here, who may be good there. The expectation, as far as I'm concerned, is UCF should expect to hit the ground running. It's not going to take that year. If you remember when Eric Chenander, was that 2016, if my memory serves me correct, when Eric Chenander was coming in first year defensive coordinator, and he felt like he needed that year to kind of learn and get adjusted to the role. With all these guys, expect to hit the ground running because you have that level of familiarity and continuity. I will say this, the one hire that did kind of give me a little bit of pause was David Gibbs. And once again, you have that history back to their ties at Auburn. But when David Gibbs was defensive coordinator at Texas Tech, there's no two ways about it. They were abysmal. 2015, 2016, they gave up an average of 43 points per game. Part of the reason Cliff Kingsbury is no longer coaching his alma mater in the NFL is because they couldn't stop anybody. And with the offensive scheme that UCF is going to run, they're still going to look to be up-tempo and fast-paced. you still run into that same deal you had with Randy Shannon coaching for the past 2 seasons at UCF, which is your defense isn't getting a lot of rest, right? So we'll have to see how that plays into factor. And of course, it'll be him and Travis Williams as well with the defensive coordinator role. So that gave me pause. But all in all, I was a really, huge fan of the staff he's able to assemble with that, $3.3 million assistant pool. And we'll see how things play out.
Harris obviously has a reputation as a good recruiter. Who are the best players he's brought into FIU, and how well has that running backs room performed in the last couple of years under him?
Sure. So the names might not jump out to you guys. A lot of the running backs, I'll put it to you like this. They had 2 running backs, Anthony Jones and Napoleon Maxwell, both spent time in the NFL and camps. I believe Anthony Jones may have made the club coming out of camp, but was cut, didn't see any time in any games. But those would be the 2 NFL running backs he's coached. But in terms of recent running backs, I can run down guys who UCF fans may not be familiar with, but they're players who, if they were a couple inches taller or maybe didn't get hurt his junior or senior year, would be Power 5 talent. Guys like Lexington Flex Joseph, who he's a kid who's 5'6", $175 at FIU, was a 3-star recruit come out of Miami Central. There's no doubt if he were 5'10", 5'11", he'd be a Power 5 kid. A kid like Sean Peterson Jr., who was recruited by many Power 5 schools to play linebacker. At 6'3", 230, you would think he's going to be on the defensive side of the ball. He made up his mind he's a running back, comes to FIU, has performed really well. So those would be, probably as far as the most successful names would be Jones and Maxwell, who made it to the NFL, and probably the more higher profile names would be guys like Sean Peterson Jr. and Flex Joseph and guys who've had Power 5 interests. But again, the thing that I think he's bringing to UCF is the fact that you're not walking in and saying, hey, we play in a stadium, no disrespect to FIU, where you're only drawing about 2,000 people a game. You're not selling them on an athletic program that is probably 10, 15 years behind UCF's in terms of overall development. You're walking in and saying, hey, you look up there, you got the national championship, sprawled across the press box. You got Fiesta Bowl trophies, that's Fiesta Bowl, Peach Bowl wins. So I think that's the biggest thing that's going to be an asset to Tim Harris.
Is that 2,000 COVID restriction, or you're just talking a typical Saturday night at an FIU game?
No, I'm talking a typical Saturday night at FIU game. You're probably running about 1,500 to 2,000 people, give or take. That is not a COVID restriction.
I certainly would say that a good portion of the UCF fan base would make the statement that UCF, from a recruiting standpoint, has not fully capitalized on the 2017 national championship. What say you?
Sure. No, I completely agree. It's funny. A friend of mine who actually works for 247 Sports, he said to me the other day, Eric, why isn't UCF crushing in recruiting? And the best answer that I would give is I don't think they necessarily had guys who were really adept to recruit the state of Florida, outside of Randy Shannon, who, of course, is a legendary recruiter in the state of Florida. The rest of these guys, again, I'm not here to critique, Josh Heupel and Scott Frost, but I made the Germany crack. I don't know why you're going overseas or, to the West Coast and all taking a national approach. You don't need to do that. How dominate the state of Florida, right? Get all those kids who are not ending up at Florida State, and Miami, and now that you have a Gus Malzahn, you should be competing for those kids. They should have been looking at UCF as their first option. And I do absolutely think there have been a lot of missed opportunities. And just even when you talk to recruits, even guys who were out of date in Broward County who ended up at FIU, I hope I'm not betraying any trust. I won't name any names, but a lot of them who are kids who are making an impact at Conference USA said, hey, we'd have loved the chance to go to UCF, and maybe we don't start immediately, but want to be a part of the brand. So I think there was a missed opportunity to capitalize on all of that success in the state of Florida.
So, Eric, do you think that Gus and this staff can consistently recruit the 4-star players?
Yeah. I mean, I don't see why not. I think the big thing is he brings that name recognition, right? So he has a little bit of a pedigree. Frost and Title, we always kind of felt like one foot was out the door, especially in the case of Scott Frost. He obviously ended up leaving, but there was always that air of how long will he be here? With Gus Malzahn, I absolutely think that he'll be there for 3, 4, 5 years, and you don't have that consistent feeling of like, okay, are you going to be my coach when I'm here as a junior? Are you going to be my coach when I'm here as a senior? So I don't see any reason why they won't be able to secure talent and really convince them that, hey, this is going to be a 4-year plan, and you're not going to be looking over your shoulder at a new position coach, a new strength coach, maybe.
UCF and FIU have played a few times now. FIU has won a couple of those. Where do those wins rank in FIU history, the wins over UCF?
The one I remember distinctly, I was still a student. That was the 2015 year that Alex Magoo came into then Bright House Network Stadium and upset UCF 15-14. That was my senior year, so I walked out the stadium rather depressed. But no, FIU fans definitely, especially the 2015 one, that's a win that they like to think of, all the time as really kind of being an achievement, considering the brand that UCF has built for themselves. Now, with that being said, I think UCF's, giving it back to them. They've repaid that debt, right? In terms of the 2017 year, and also 2016 and 2017. I know it's both Mackenzie Milton's year. One game at Miami, and one game the season opener, I believe 2018 was that 63-30, 63-17, like that. So absolutely, the win over UCF in 15 is one they talk about, but. Again, I think UCF's more than made up for it in the past few years. And they're really excited. They were really excited to play in 2020. Of course, COVID, eliminated that opportunity, and we're really hoping to get that game back on the schedule in 2021. So 2022, we'll see what happens. Right now, I think there's no clear, it's clear UCF is light years ahead where FIU is currently speaking.
New athletic director Terry Mohajir said of Gus Malzahn, best coach in the state of Florida. What do you think of that statement?
Okay, so Gus Malzahn had a lot of success at Auburn, and really quick, I'll just kind of give you my quick synopsis on Gus Malzahn, the hire. I know there were some UCF fans who kind of had a level of consternation towards the thought of him being the coach, and a certain Twitter user kind of compared his record at Auburn to Josh Heupel's before loss years at UCF, and those are not the same. Okay, it's a difference when you're losing to Alabama and Georgia and LSU. It wasn't like they were losing to the Mississippi State Vanderbilts of the SEC. You know what I mean? So it's a great hire. And in terms of him being the top coach in Florida, when you look at the tenures of a lot of these coaches, I mean, Jeff Scott, a recent coach, Mike Norvell at Florida State, a recent hire. I think you can make the argument. I may be, and I hope this doesn't come across as biased, anyone who manages to assemble the 2001 Miami Hurricanes, now granted that was, 2 decades ago when I was in elementary school or being in middle school. It's been a while, but you got to give Butch Davis some credit. I saw a 247 Sports poll that had him ranked last in terms of the recruiters in Florida. Who can assemble as arguably the greatest college football team in the history of deserve credit. So I put Butch Davis up there. I guess that argument, given the lack of tenure of the rest of the coaches, Willie Taggart and others. So yeah, I guess when you kind of talk it out, yeah, I can see that. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone at the HBCU level or anything like that. But yeah, I can't see why not.
Eric, Danny White had a famous edict that he would not do a 2-for-1 schedule. Terry Mohajir, the new AD, seems to be more open to that. If Terry Mohajir called you and asked you for advice on scheduling and asked you for advice on 2-for-1s, what would you tell him?
Play anyone, anytime, anywhere. I know that's not necessarily the most popular opinion. I was kind of the opposite opinion of Danny White. I understood it from the quote unquote economic aspect, right? That and listen, running an athletic department, it is not a for-profit business. You always got to be looking at dollars and cents, and like it or not, UCF is still a group of 5 school in the sense that they don't have the TV revenues that the Power 5 schools have, right? And I can understand that being a big deal. Or something you have to take into account when you're going to lose the entire game worth of revenue. And of course, UCF sold out and everything that comes with that. But in terms of building your football program, I think you should play anyone, anytime, anywhere. To be completely honest, I think there were some missed opportunities with the 2018, 2019. Of course, those schedules are enhanced, but if you can get a one-off, even if it's a road game, at an established P5, I think there were some missed opportunities given the level of talent that were on these teams. I mean, you look at 2020, you can have guys like Marlon Mims and Trey Nixon and Otis Anderson who are, if they're not drafted, they're going to be in pro camps. So if you tell me I've got a group of 5 school and we've got a dozen or maybe a half dozen NFL players or NFL type players on my roster, I'm going to your place and we'll let the chips fall where they may.
You mentioned you went to UCF, obviously a UCF fan at heart. You're working at FIU. How does that work on a game day? Say we're playing at the same time. Do you record the game? Do you try to not find out the score? Do you watch on your phone while you're at work? What do you do?
Well, just to make clear, I don't work for FIU. I know that gets confused from time to time. I cover FIU, but nevertheless, I understand what you're saying. You know what? Here's the best way I can do that question. The degree always says UCF. No one can take that away from me. I may have turned in my fan card in terms of UCF football for the time being. All other UCF sports, I definitely consider myself a fan. You get a chance to cover these kids and know the kids at FIU. If FIU played the 2020, I would consider myself a UC fan. How can I walk there and try to talk to them with a straight face? You know what I mean? So it's I determine that card for the time being. But do I check the scores and keep up with the program? Absolutely. By virtue of the fact that I cover Group of 5 football for SB Nation, and also I don't just graduate and then hey, all right, yeah. You think I'm not going to check on the UCF score and see what's going on? And listen, in the effort of full disclosure, there have been a couple games where, hey, it's wrapped up in the fourth quarter and, you flip on ESPN and you got YouTube TV press box. Let's see what that UCF score is. So I absolutely will concede that.
All right, let's wrap up with this. You can only choose one, and tank top is not an option. Shacket or sweater vest?
Sweater vest. I hated the shacket. The shacket was dumb. Hated the shacket. Sweater vest.
Can't show off
the sweater vest is the shacket. Right. Okay. That's correct. But B, if I see the shacket had no swag, that is correct. The sweater vest is multi-purpose, multi-dimensional. The shacket, I just look like I'm just wearing a glorified garbage bag.
Sweater vest with no shirt under it. The guns are out, baby.
Yeah, hey, I could rock the sweater vest, nothing underneath and go to a game, right, and not look completely ridiculous. So there you go. But yeah, that's an easy answer. Sweater vest over the shacket all day.
Well, I think we know the fashion choice for you and UCF Mike at the next tailgate before a UCF game, and especially when UCF plays at FIU. Eric Henry, UCF alum, at Eric C. Henry _ co-managing editor, Underdog Dynasty, FIU beat writer. We thank you for joining us for a few moments on the Sons of UCF Live.
No, I appreciate you guys having me.
All right, that's good stuff. A little bit of fashion talk. Got a little bit more insight on Tim Harris Jr. I like the hire of Tim Harris, if only from the recruiting standpoint, but certainly he's had success with running backs, and that a greater emphasis on the running game is a part of the Coach Malzahn style.
Yeah, Eric did a good job of convincing me. I had said on the show this week on the podcast that I couldn't think of the marquee recruit that Tim Harris had brought in. I wasn't questioning that he was a recruiter, but I couldn't think of the pipeline of talent that he had funneled into FIU that was coming out successful. But I think Eric makes a good point about the product you're selling, the school you're selling, the brand you're selling. And if he's able to get kids that had some talent that were able to get in camps, and you now put him with the UCF logo on a shirt, with more resources, with tradition UCF has, maybe there is something there. So I think Eric's done a nice job of convincing me that while you can't necessarily see a breadcrumb of recruits like a Sean Beckton's had for UCF, that Tim Harris has the ability to do that, and maybe with a UCF logo on a shirt, maybe that makes a world of difference.
It's going to make a huge difference. I mean, we're talking about he said it. FIU is drawing flies to their game. And then you got the kids watching these UCF games that the house is rocking every weekend. They know who UCF is. It's going to make a big difference. And the kids in Miami are going to flock to UCF.
Flies at FIU. Some 2,000 of them, apparently. Let's go around the kingdom a little bit. UCF men's basketball on a bit of a roll. Just 3 games left, 2 at home before the finale a week from this Thursday at ECU. Quite a score fest. You had to take the over, would have been the smart money on UCF's 84-81 win over Tulane. But they do seem to be gelling at just the right time.
Yeah, Trace, I told Mike this week, I'm really excited about what you're seeing out of these kids. They're playing hard every game, right? Sometimes the ball's not bouncing in the basket. Sometimes we don't get the breaks we need. And that just comes with the learning curve of learning to win together as a team. You can see the moments, the flashes where these guys have it all together, where they're executing at the right level. So you feel like it's right there for us to at some point break through. Not sure if we have enough time this season to really get to that point. Maybe make a little bit of noise in the AAC tournament. Who knows? But you got to be excited for the effort these kids show. Listen, if they had all tapped out and said, "Hey, we're done for the year," I don't think anybody would have blamed them. But they keep fighting, and you see performances like you saw out of Isaiah Adams, and you've got to be hopeful that the 2021 basketball season hopefully sets out to be pretty exciting for UCF.
The offense is coming around now. You mentioned Isaiah Adams. How about CJ Walker the other night against the Cows? Putting together some good offensive performances. That was what we were missing earlier in the year, kind of just relying on Mahan in the first couple weeks. And now the team is – remember, we had 2 weeks where we didn't play a game. And the whole COVID thing, yes, the schedule has gotten a lot easier, but the guys are starting to come together a little bit. We finish off the season strong here, maybe make get a win or two in the conference tournament. It's not a bad year leading into next year.
Adams was the AAC's freshman of the week. He was on fire against Tulane. And one of the things Coach Dawkins has talked about is that he has not stopped working. And Adams himself said after the Tulane game that just by keeping and working, keep working, he worked his way through some of his difficulties.
A stretch where I wasn't doing so well shooting the ball. And we talked about that with my team, my coaches, and then they just wanted me to just stay ready. And that's what I was. They just told me that after the game, they freaking soaked me with water and like just stay ready and coming off the bench. And then so I was just like, that's all I did was just stay ready.
All right, Knights 6 and 10 in the AAC, 8 and 11 overall, 3 games left. We'll have a couple of them to talk about for you. You'll have the Saturday game to talk about on the pod, and then we'll have a couple of games to talk about next week leading into the ECU game at 9 o'clock. It was good to see Mike at UCF baseball at FAU on Sunday, but boy, the Knights are off to a struggling start. They dropped the game. How about that, Mike? They put up 15 runs a couple of times, score so much in the 3-game series where they lose 2 out of 3 against FAU and get shut out to Stetson. Knights 1-3 now.
Yeah, they must have been tired from running the bases all weekend, and they couldn't muster up anything against Stetson the other night. But hey, I mentioned this to you the other night too. Even the '98 Yankees started out 0-2. Even the '98 Yankees started out 1-4, and then went on, of course, to win 22 of the next 24 games. So let's see if this team is capable of something. Obviously, a tough matchup this weekend against the #1 team in the country in Ole Miss. I mean, it can't get worse, right? I guess it could, but hopefully not.
It can. The pitching, though, is there. It was a question I asked of interim manager Ted Tom. What do you expect to see from these starters who struggled in the opening couple of games?
The key for those guys, for all of our guys, is just being able to fill up the zone and having and continuing to maintain their composure when things don't go their way, whether it's a loud out, loud contact, a ball strike, whatever happens, just continuing to get to the next pitch and getting back to your baseline for that following pitch. And if we can continue to improve on that, then I think we'll see better results.
Interim manager, because manager Greg Lovelady has been out because of COVID, but Coach Tom said that Coach Lovelady will be joining the team Friday at Ole Miss. The team flew out Thursday to Memphis and then busing to Oxford, Mississippi. Coach Lovelady will be going separately. That's the plan, to meet them there. And as Mike mentioned, a tough series Friday, Saturday, Sunday at #1 Ole Miss. I was really hoping that they would have evened up at 2-2 after the Stetson game at home Tuesday. You just don't want to get swept. You don't want to get embarrassed. I mean, the pitching's given up a lot of runs, but these are still good pitchers. They just have not gotten off to a good start. But 98 Yankees, maybe we keep that in our hopes. A tough one for UCF softball. They are ranked 22nd. They fell to number 20 Missouri 6-5 Wednesday night. The bigger story, though, is over the weekend, Aaliyah White beat New Mexico State. Career win number 81, passing Shelby Turnier as the all-time winningest pitcher in UCF softball history. This is their 20th season, so a big congratulations to her. A kudos to Sammy Kincaid with a tremendous 3.5-minute feature that's all over social media today on Aaliyah premature birth and how she it was touch and go in the early days of her life, and now to see such a dominant pitcher. A big part of UCF softball history made in that win over New Mexico State. They've got the doubleheader with McNeese State Friday, and then they play Saturday. Some of the other sports, women's soccer's off to a good start. Men's soccer, not so much. They lost to the hated Cows over the weekend. They are 1-2 in a 10-game season with tough matches against SMU home and away. That's going to be difficult for the men. Women's basketball also doing pretty well. So, it's all sports collide at this time. Enjoyed, I caught up to it. It took me a couple of trips in the car, but I caught up with your Greg McCrae interview. I enjoyed interviewing Greg and talking to him during his time at UCF. Soft-spoken, but I like what Mike said on the show, that this is not a guy that's ever been fixated on his own personal records. He seemed to not be aware of some of the questions, some of the stats that you guys brought up, that he seemed, it wasn't that big a deal to him. I enjoyed listening to him.
Yeah, great kid, humble kid. To your point, Trace, obviously he could have definitely bragged on his stats he's had. He's one of the best to ever do it at UCF in the running back position. And we've got a clip from the show. And one of the things that, when we talked to Jacob Harris and we talked to Trey Nixon, both of them, and when we talked about whether or not they were going to come back, they both seemed pretty, set on. They decided early on they were not coming back to UCF. They were not taking advantage of their year. Well, Mike asked Greg McCrae the same question, and I thought his answer gave me a little bit of glimmer of hope of what could have been. Maybe if Greg had made a different decision.
Yeah, I definitely had thoughts about coming back. I mean, like my thoughts about coming back were I probably didn't actually make up my mind that I was gonna declare for the draft until about probably like 4 or 5 days before I actually declared or put it out on social media that I declared. If even that long, maybe it was probably like three days before.
Can you imagine that running back room with Greg McCrae in it right now too? This upcoming season, man, that'd have been something special.
The guy, I want to say quietly, but one of the best running backs we've ever had. He's top 5 in almost every stat, and that's including a 2019 season where he missed a couple games for injury, a 2020 season that was shortened for COVID. I mean, add in a couple more games here and there. He didn't get a lot of playing time in 2017. If he plays all 4 years or he comes back next year, he could have broken some of these other records, or at least come very close to Kevin Smith's records. So a very good career, very good kid. I enjoyed talking to him. I wish him the best. I hope he ends up on an NFL roster somewhere. And one of the best nights we've had here in the running backs room for a while.
And Mike, it's actually even more telling. You think about those other guys. You think about all the other talent that Greg McCrae had around him, and he still put those numbers up. Right? He wasn't even the bell cow, the bellwether back that most teams have had, like a Kevin Smith was, or like a Latavius Murray or Marquette Smith. He split carries with like 3 or 4 other dudes who were also really, really good. So to put those numbers up with that crowded backfield, it's just fantastic. And it was great to catch up with Greg. Such a good kid, quiet kid, humble kid. We try to get him excited a little bit at times. I don't know if we actually pulled that off, but it's always good to catch up with guys like Greg McCrae.
And it would have been interesting to see what he would have done in a Gus Malzahn offense for a season as well, with the emphasis on the running game. So have you guys thought of any questions, or were there any scrolled during the show for Coach Malzahn with the 9 a.m. media availability? Anything
Here's
that
the one
comes to your mind besides
one,
the hot dog and sandwich questions? Any of those?
Here's the one I like the most from Chad. Or what are UCF's biggest needs for next season as far as areas of improvement? Now, I'm not sure he'll answer it that way, but perhaps, Trace, you spin it as to you've watched a ton of tape on this team. What do you like about what you've seen so far, and what are the things you want to work on? You could spin that. You're a pro at this.
I like that question, Chad. Mike, what do you got?
I don't know, but I can tell you what not to ask him. Don't ask him how he likes his hash browns at Waffle House. Don't ask him what he thinks about the national championship. I don't know, man. I haven't really thought about it.
Avoid
we had so much
questions
going on during the show. I kind of forgot about the whole thing when you asked me at the beginning.
I'm glad to see you're paying attention. That's good. So what was also good news this week?
Oh, I got you. Ask him if he likes to wear tank tops. How's that?
No. You really don't want me to be a part of these media availabilities after Friday at 9, do you? So what was good news this week is that Adam, you successfully hooked up. The Sons of UCF have a team in the UCF Alumni Association's Race the Night virtual 5K. I have registered, and I'll tell you what is it about the Sons of UCF pod that Mike feels that there's a need to take shots at me? Oh, I'm not worried about Trace. Trace is no threat. just proving that I listen. A week before, he just sort of invited himself over. He's got his feet kicked up on the table. Now he's on with Gus Malzahn.
Again, Adam said that.
I'm not sure I actually said that. I got accused of that last week. I don't recall saying that. Listen, Mike has said it on the show. He's trying to start some sort of a beef with somebody, Trace. And I think you're the only one who actually listens enough to engage him in some of these things. So you just may win by default on that. But super excited about the group. Big thanks to Monica from the Palm Beach Association for helping us get that set up. It's kind of tricky, but when you get to step 3, if you scroll down, there'll be a group section. You hit the little button there. You scroll down some more, you'll find Sons of UCF. Sign up. I know Mike is already talking a ton of trash to any and everybody who wants to sign up. He wants only the tip top best athletes on his team. He's promising more hats than he has to deliver. There's just a lot going on with Mike. It's a hot mess over there.
I'm not worried. Our team is that our team against other teams? Because get on my back, baby. We're gonna win the whole thing if it's a competition. Sons of UCF. I'm not scared. I'm not scared of any other teams that are out there. But it's gonna be a fun time. Trace might bring our numbers down a little bit, I think, but don't worry. That's what me and Adam are here for. We're gonna pick us up. Are you training, Trace? That's what everybody wants to know. Have you put the rubber to the road? Have you started training for this thing?
I am working closely with Jan and Britt. So what they do, I'll do. I'm part of their team. We're going to compete together on this as part of the Sons of UCF team. By the way, when you scroll through that, you see all these alumni chapters, Denver alumni chapter. Then you see Sons of UCF. So you're in quite prestigious company right there to have that team name. So
Denver has a little disadvantage with that high altitude. I'm not worried about those guys.
I see Jan is...
How does Mike have scouting reports already on this? I don't even understand. How
about Jan piping in with Britt might beat you?
She's talking to you. She's not talking to me.
Britt is our secret weapon in this. But remember, we're all on the same team, Mike. We're just trying to defeat the other alumni chapters. We're trying to take down Denver. We're not trying to beat each other.
You need to find another team to start some beef with. It shouldn't be internal, right? We're not the Kobe Shaq Lakers here. You need to find another team that you can start some trash talk with.
But the team is only as good as its weakest link, which is Trace. And I'm trying to elevate the team. I'm like Michael Jordan. I'm trying to get the best out of our own players. So I'm not worried about beating these Denver. Come on. Who else? What other alumni associations are out there? West Palm Beach? Where's Paul Jones's lie? Where is he in? Is he in the Sons of UCF group or is he in the Palm Beach? Where's his loyalty?
You didn't get him that hat you promised him, so I don't know where. I don't know where he's at now.
Get him into the game Sunday. You let Paul down.
All right. Hey, it's going to be for a good cause. It's going to be a fun time. And the medal is beautiful. And one lucky person is going to get one of those Sons of UCF hats. If you can win the Sons of UCF group, we'll get the list together of who's actually in the group.
All right. So let's challenge the other alumni chapters, not one another. And Janice,
let's challenge the other podcasts. We're the #1 racing podcast in UCF.
Racing, not rating. What do you think of a little segment where we take clips from the other shows and critique them? I think that would be fun. Maybe we'll do that next week.
I'm in. What do you want me to do? Yeah. Who do you got?
Well, we got so many to choose from. I want to end with a shout out to our favorite fan, Libby at Libs407, who last week posted on her Twitter, truly love Thursday nights live with the Sons of UCF. So I'm sure she's quite happy to see Eric Henry, who she likes to razz on Twitter. We appreciate Libby joining us. And has Libby joined the Sons of UCF team yet? There's the challenge. I can beat Libby's time. Jan and Britt can beat Libby's time. There's the challenge right there.
Wow. I don't think Libby, I have not seen her in the chat this evening, so I'm not sure if she's watching this live or not, Trey. So you may have a couple hours of reprieve to retract that statement because I imagine you are going to get a talking to very, very soon.
That's for sure. That's for sure. All right, it's been fun. I've enjoyed our conversations with our guests tonight, and appreciate everybody that's tuned in for yet another edition of Sons of UCF Live. And I look forward to talking with Coach Malzahn on Friday morning. Some thoughts that have come from this tonight. So for Adam and Mike, I'm Trey Strolko. Go Knights.
Charge on.